Elizabeth Thornton learned her mother was dead on a Tuesday morning in April 1942. The telegram arrived while she was making coffee in her cramped apartment in Brooklyn. She read it 3 times before her hands started shaking. Marie Laurent Thornton, executed by German authorities in Lyon, February 18, 1942. Reason: aiding enemies of the Reich. Her mother had gone back to France in 1939 to care for Elizabeth's dying grandmother. She was supposed to return before Christmas. Then the Germans invaded and the borders closed and the letters stopped coming. Elizabeth had spent 2 years imagining her mother trapped, but alive, waiting out the war in her childhood home. She had never imagined this. Elizabeth sat on the floor of her kitchen and stared at the telegram until the words blurred together. Her mother had been dead for 2 months, and she had not known. She had been going to work, laughing at jokes, living her life while her mother's body rotted in an unmarked grave somewhere in occupied France. The coffee pot boiled over. She did not move. 3 weeks later, she walked into a recruitment office in Manhattan and volunteered for war work. Any war work. She did not care what they assigned her. She just needed to do something. Anything. The rage inside her had nowhere to go, and it was eating her alive. The recruiter, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, took her information and told her someone would be in touch. Elizabeth nodded and left. She did not expect to hear back. But 2 days later, a man in a gray suit knocked on her door and handed her an address written on a slip of paper. No name, no explanation, just an address and a time. She went. The office was on the 3rd floor of a building that looked like it should have been condemned. The man waiting for her introduced himself as Donovan. He had a folder on his desk with her name on it. "Your mother was Marie Laurent before she married," Donovan said, without preamble. "She worked with a resistance cell in Lyon, ran messages, hid Allied pilots, forged documents. The Gestapo caught her passing information to a British agent. They tortured her for 3 days before they shot her. She never gave up a single name." Elizabeth felt the room tilt. "How do you know that?" "Because I read the report from the British agent she saved. He made it back to London. 12 others in her network escaped because your mother kept her mouth shut, while the Gestapo broke her fingers one by one." Donovan leaned back in his chair. "She died a hero, Miss Thornton. Most people never get that chance." "I did not come here for a history lesson," Elizabeth said. Her voice sounded strange, distant. "No, you came here because you want revenge?" Donovan opened the folder. "You speak French like a native. You studied literature at Barnard. You are smart, angry, and you have nothing left to lose. That makes you exactly what I need." "What are you talking about?" "I run an organization called the Office of Strategic Services. We put people behind enemy lines, agents, operatives, spies, if you want to use the vulgar term." He pulled out a photograph and slid it across the desk. "Recognize him?" Elizabeth looked at the photograph. It showed a man in a black SS uniform, maybe 40 years old, with cold eyes and a thin smile. "No, who is he?" "Sturmbannf, or Klaus Hoffmann, Gestapo, Lion Division. He signed your mother's death warrant." The air left Elizabeth's lungs. "He has been transferred to Paris," Donovan continued. "Promoted, actually. He now runs counterintelligence operations for the entire occupied zone. Very successful, very dangerous. He has dismantled 4 resistance networks in the past year alone." Donovan tapped the photograph. "I want him destroyed, and I think you are the person who can do it." Elizabeth stared at the face in the photograph. This man had killed her mother. This man had given the order. This man was still alive, still breathing, still walking around Paris, like he had done nothing wrong. "What do you want me to do?" she asked quietly. "I want you to go to Paris. I want you to get close to him, and I want you to gather enough intelligence to bring his entire operation down." Donovan lit a cigarette. "It will take months, maybe years. You will have to become someone else. Live a lie every single day. One mistake and you will end up like your mother." "When do I start?" Donovan smiled. "Tomorrow." The training nearly killed her. 6 months of hell that pushed her past every limit she thought she had. They taught her how to shoot, how to fight, how to lie, how to seduce, how to kill. They broke her down and built her back up into something harder, something colder. She was not Elizabeth Thornton anymore. Elizabeth Thornton was weak. Elizabeth Thornton had cried over her mother's telegram and felt helpless. Marie Dubois did not cry. Marie Dubois did not feel helpless. Marie Dubois was a secretary from Marseille with forged papers and a cover story and a mission. Marie Dubois was going to Paris to destroy the man who murdered her mother. The airplane shook violently as it crossed into French airspace. Elizabeth sat in the cargo hold, checking her equipment for the 10th time. Beside her, the jumpmaster shouted instructions she could barely hear over the engine roar. In her pocket, she carried 2 things: a forged identity card with Marie Dubois' name, and the photograph of Sturmbannf Herr Klaus Hoffmann that Donovan had given her. She had memorized every line of his face, the shape of his jaw, the way his eyes looked dead even when he smiled. She imagined what it would feel like to put a bullet between those eyes. She had practiced it 100 times in training. But that was not the mission. The mission was to get close, to make him trust her, to steal his secrets and feed them back to London until his entire network collapsed. The jumpmaster tapped her shoulder. 30 seconds! Elizabeth moved to the door. Wind screamed past. Below was darkness. She thought about her mother, wondered if she had been afraid when they came for her, if she had known she was going to die. Go! Elizabeth jumped into the night. She landed in a field somewhere south of Paris and rolled to absorb the impact. Pain shot through her ribs. She ignored it. She could hear voices approaching, French voices, her contacts. A man emerged from the darkness. Older, maybe 50, with the kind of face that had seen too much. Marie Dubois? Yes. He looked her over. You are younger than I expected. I am old enough. He grunted. We will see. Come on. The Germans patrol this area. We need to move. Elizabeth gathered her parachute and followed him across the field. Her ribs ached with every step. She did not let it show. How long until we reach Paris? She asked. 3 days. Maybe 4. He glanced back at her. You know what you are walking into? Paris is not like the training camp. One wrong word, one wrong look, and the Gestapo will have you in a cell before you can blink. I know. Good. Because the man you are after, Hoffmann, he is not stupid. He has a nose for lies. He has caught better agents than you. The man stopped and turned to face her. You sure you want to do this? Elizabeth pulled out the photograph of Hoffmann and stared at it in the moonlight. The face that had haunted her dreams for 6 months. The man who had tortured her mother until she died. I am sure, she said. The man nodded slowly. Then God help you, because once you meet him, there is no going back. Elizabeth tucked the photograph away and started walking. Somewhere ahead, in the darkness, lay Paris. And somewhere in Paris, Sturmbannf Herr Klaus Hoffmann was waiting. He just did not know it yet. Paris, October 1942. Elizabeth had been Marie Dubois for 4 months, and she was starting to forget the difference. She lived in a tiny apartment on Rue de la Huchette, 4th floor, no elevator. She worked as a secretary at a textile import company that did business with German military procurement offices. The job was real. The company was real. Her boss, Monsieur Arnaud, was a collaborator who enjoyed having Germans at his dinner table and French wine in his cellar, while the rest of Paris starved. Elizabeth typed letters, filed documents, smiled politely, and hated every second of it. But the job gave her access. German officers came through the office weekly to review contracts and shipment schedules. She memorized their faces, their ranks, their habits. She passed information to her resistance contact, a baker named Claude, who operated a dead drop behind a loose brick in an alley off Boulevard Saint-Michel. Small intelligence, troop movements, supply routes, nothing that would win the war, but enough to prove she was useful. She had not yet met Sturmbannführer Klaus Hoffmann. That changed on a Thursday afternoon when Monsieur Arnaud called her into his office and told her to put on her best dress. They were attending a reception at the Hotel Ritz that evening. German officers, Vichy officials, the kind of people who pretended the occupation was a partnership instead of a boot on France's throat. Elizabeth wanted to refuse. But Marie Dubois smiled and said, "Of course, Monsieur Arnaud, it would be an honor." She wore a dark blue dress that her resistance contact had stolen from a shop on the Champs-Elysees. It fit perfectly. She hated how good she looked in it. The Ritz was obscene. Champagne and caviar, while people outside ate sawdust bread and waited in ration lines. German officers in crisp uniforms laughing with French women who had decided survival was more important than pride. Elizabeth moved through the crowd with a glass of champagne she did not drink, listening to conversations, filing away names and details. That was when she saw him. Sturmbannf? Herr Klaus Hoffmann stood near the bar, talking to a Vichy minister. He looked exactly like his photograph. Cold eyes, thin smile. The kind of face that belonged on a recruiting poster for evil. Elizabeth felt her heartbeat spike. 4 months of waiting, and here he was, 10 meters away. She had planned for this moment, rehearsed it. She knew exactly what she was supposed to do. Approach slowly. Engineer a chance meeting. Be charming, but not too charming. Make him notice her without making him suspicious. But now that he was here, actually here, she could not move. This man had tortured her mother, broken her fingers, put a bullet in her head. Elizabeth's hand tightened around her champagne glass. She imagined throwing it in his face, imagined pulling the small knife she kept strapped to her thigh and driving it into his throat. "Careful, mademoiselle. You are going to shatter that glass." Elizabeth jerked around. A German officer stood beside her, younger than Hoffmann, maybe 30, with dark hair and a scar along his jawline. He wore the rank insignia of an Obersturmbannführer, a lieutenant. "I apologize," Elizabeth said in French, loosening her grip. "I was distracted." "Clearly." The officer switched to flawless French. "May I ask what has captured your attention so completely? Or should I be jealous?" Elizabeth forced a smile. "I do not believe we have met, monsieur." "Obersturmbannführer Werner Brandt?" He gave a slight bow. "And you are?" "Marie Dubois. I work for Monsieur Arnaud." She gestured vaguely toward her boss, who was holding court with a group of Vichy officials across the room. "Ah, the textile man. Dull work, I imagine, Extremely, Brandt laughed. It was a genuine laugh, warm and surprising. At least you are honest. Most people at these events pretend to find everything fascinating. He took a sip of his drink. So, Marie Dubois, if you are not here for the scintillating conversation, what are you here for? The question was casual, but his eyes were sharp, testing her. My employer insisted, Elizabeth said. I suspect he enjoys showing off his French secretary to his German friends. It makes him feel cosmopolitan. Does it bother you? Would it matter if it did? Brandt studied her for a moment. You are different from the others here. How so? You have not once smiled at me like I am doing you a favor by speaking to you. You have not complimented my uniform or asked if I know any important people. You are treating me like a human being who happens to be wearing the wrong outfit. He tilted his head. Why? Elizabeth felt ice in her stomach. She had made a mistake. She was supposed to be charming, deferential, forgettable. Instead, she was being herself, and that was dangerous. I apologize if I have offended you, Obersturmführer. You have not. Brandt set down his glass. In fact, you have made this insufferable evening slightly less insufferable. Would you care to dance? Before Elizabeth could answer, another voice cut in. Werner, stop monopolizing the most beautiful woman in the room. Sturmbannführer Klaus Hoffmann stepped beside them. Up close, he was taller than Elizabeth had imagined. His uniform was immaculate. His smile did not reach his eyes. Klaus, Brandt said, I was just introducing myself to Mademoiselle Dubois. Were you? Hoffmann's gaze moved to Elizabeth. She felt it like a physical thing, cold and calculating. Marie Dubois, Arnaud's secretary. I have seen your name on shipping manifests. He had noticed her. Without ever meeting her, he had noticed her name. Elizabeth felt her training kick in. Smile. Be flattered. Play the game. I am honored you remember Sturmbannführer. I remember everything, mademoiselle. It is a professional necessity. Hoffmann extended his hand. Dance with me. It was not a request. Elizabeth took his hand. His grip was firm, controlled. He led her to the dance floor and pulled her close. Too close. She could smell his cologne. Expensive. German. You are nervous, Hoffmann said as they began to move. Should I not be? I have never danced with a Sturmbannführer before. You should not be nervous unless you have something to hide. His hand tightened on her waist. Do you have something to hide, Marie? Elizabeth met his eyes. The same eyes that had looked at her mother before, giving the order to execute her. Everyone in Paris has something to hide, Sturmbannführer. It is how we survive. Hoffmann smiled. An honest answer. How refreshing. He spun her expertly. Tell me, Marie, what do you think of the occupation? It was a trap. Whatever she said would be wrong. I think it is not my place to have opinions about such things. Clever girl, but I am asking anyway. Elizabeth chose her words carefully. I think the war has made the world complicated. I think people do what they must to survive. And I think dancing with you is probably the most dangerous thing I have done all week. Hoffmann laughed. Actually laughed. You are either very brave or very stupid. Perhaps both. Perhaps. The music slowed. Hoffmann pulled her closer. His lips were near her ear. I am going to be watching you, Marie Dubois. I find you interesting. And in my experience, interesting people are either very useful or very dangerous. Which do you hope I am? I have not decided yet. The song ended. Hoffmann released her and stepped back. He gave a slight bow. Thank you for the dance, mademoiselle. I suspect we will see each other again soon." He walked away, leaving Elizabeth standing alone on the dance floor. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them behind her back so no one would see. Werner Brandt appeared beside her. "You handled that well. Klaus does not usually let people off that easily." "What do you mean?" "He was testing you, seeing if you would crack." Brandt handed her a fresh glass of champagne. "You did not. Congratulations. You have his attention now." "Is that a good thing?" "For most people? No." Brandt's expression turned serious. "Be careful, Marie. Klaus is brilliant, but he is also dangerous. He sees patterns where others see coincidences. He suspects everyone of everything. It is what makes him good at his job." "And what is his job exactly?" "Catching spies." Elizabeth felt the floor drop out from under her. Brandt touched her elbow lightly. "I have said too much. Forgive me. The champagne makes me talkative." He hesitated. "May I see you again? Perhaps somewhere less suffocating than this?" Elizabeth looked across the room. Hoffman was watching her. Even from a distance, she could feel his gaze. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I would like that." Brandt smiled. "Tomorrow evening. There is a caf on Rue Mouffetard that still has real coffee, if you know the owner. 7 o'clock? 7 o'clock. He kissed her hand and disappeared into the crowd. Elizabeth left the reception an hour later. She walked back to her apartment through blacked-out streets, her mind racing. She had met Hoffman. She had danced with him. She had looked into the eyes of the man who murdered her mother, and she had smiled and played her part. And tomorrow she was having coffee with a different German officer who seemed kind and human and nothing like what she expected. She climbed the 4 flights to her apartment and locked the door behind her. Only then did she let herself shake. She went to the bathroom and vomited into the sink. When she was done, she looked at herself in the mirror. Marie Dubois looked back. Calm. Composed. Perfect. Elizabeth Thornton was gone. She splashed water on her face and went to bed. But she did not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about cold eyes and warm smiles, and the fact that tomorrow she would see Werner Brandt again. And part of her, a part she did not want to acknowledge, was looking forward to it. That scared her. More than anything, Hoffman had said Werner Brandt was not supposed to be part of the plan. Elizabeth met him at the caf on Rue Mouffetard at 7 o'clock sharp. He was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of real coffee steaming in front of him. He stood when she approached and pulled out her chair like they were on a normal date in a normal city in a normal time. But nothing about this was normal. "You came," Werner said. He sounded genuinely surprised. "Did you think I would not? I thought you might reconsider spending time with a German officer. Most Parisians would rather eat glass." Elizabeth sat down and wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. It was warm, real. The smell alone was worth the risk. Most Parisians do not get invited to cafes that serve real coffee. Werner smiled. "Practical. I like that." They talked for an hour. Werner told her about growing up in Munich, studying law before the war, how he had joined the SS because it was join or be conscripted into the regular army, and at least the SS offered better pay. He talked about missing his sister, who was married to a doctor in Stuttgart. He talked about hating Paris in the winter, because the cold got into his bones and reminded him that he was a long way from home. He talked like a person, not a monster, not a symbol, Just a man who was tired and lonely and trapped in a uniform he could not take off. Elizabeth hated him for it. It would have been easier if he was cruel. If he looked at her the way Hoffman did, like she was a puzzle to be solved or a threat to be eliminated. But Werner looked at her like she was interesting, like he wanted to know her. And that made what she had to do so much harder.
"Tell me about you," Werner said, lighting a cigarette. "Who is Marie Dubois when she is not filing paperwork for textile merchants?" Elizabeth recited her cover story. Born in Marseille, parents dead, moved to Paris before the war to work, no siblings, no complications. It was all lies, every word. Werner listened without interrupting. When she finished, he stubbed out his cigarette and leaned back in his chair. "You are lying." Elizabeth's blood went cold. "Excuse me?" "Not about the facts. Those are probably true or close enough. But about yourself. You are holding back." He tilted his head. "Why?" "Perhaps I do not trust German officers I barely know." "Fair enough." Werner signaled for another round of coffee. "Then let me earn your trust. What do you want to know about me? Ask anything." "Why are you here?" "In Paris, I told you, orders." "No, why are you here with me?" Elizabeth leaned forward. "You could be at the Ritz drinking champagne with the other officers. You could be with a woman who actually wants to be with you instead of one who needs coffee. So why?" Werner was quiet for a long moment. "Because everyone else at the Ritz is playing a part. The French women smile and laugh and pretend they do not hate us. The German officers pretend we are liberators instead of occupiers. Everyone is lying to everyone." He met her eyes. "But you did not lie last night. You were nervous and angry, and you did not hide it. You treated me like a human being even though you probably wanted to spit in my face. That is rare. That is worth a cup of coffee." Elizabeth did not know what to say. Werner stood and offered his hand. "Walk with me?" They walked along the Seine as the sun set over Paris. Werner talked about books he missed reading, music he used to listen to, the life he had before the war swallowed everything. Elizabeth listened and filed away every detail. Information was currency. Every piece mattered. But part of her, the part that was still Elizabeth Thornton underneath all the lies, just listened because she wanted to. After 2 weeks, Werner kissed her on the Pont Neuf, with the lights of Paris glittering on the water below. Elizabeth kissed him back because that was what Marie Dubois would do. She told herself it meant nothing. After 6 weeks, Werner brought her to his apartment on Avenue Foch. It was large, elegant, filled with furniture that had belonged to whatever French family had been evicted to make room for German officers. Werner poured wine and put a record on the phonograph, and they danced in his living room like the war did not exist. When he led her to the bedroom, Elizabeth went willingly. She had been trained for this. Seduction was just another tool, another weapon. She could separate her body from her mind, do what needed to be done, feel nothing. But when Werner touched her, gentle and careful and asking permission with every gesture, something inside her cracked. She cried afterward. She could not help it. Werner held her and asked what was wrong. Elizabeth told him she did not know. Another lie to add to the pile. The truth was she did know. The truth was Werner Brandt was supposed to be the enemy, and instead he was kind and damaged and real. The truth was she was falling for him, and that was not part of the plan. The plan was Hoffman. She saw Klaus Hoffman 3 more times over the next 2 months. always at receptions or dinners where Monsieur Arnaud dragged her as decoration. Hoffman watched her the way a cat watches a mouse, calculating, patient, waiting for her to make a mistake. But she did not make mistakes. She was perfect. She was Marie Dubois, and Marie Dubois had nothing to hide, except everything. It was Werner who gave her access to Hoffman without meaning to. They were lying in bed one night in December when Werner mentioned that Klaus was looking for a new assistant.
His previous one had been transferred to Berlin, and he needed someone fluent in French and German who could handle sensitive documents. "You should apply," Werner said, running his fingers through her hair. "The pay is better than what Arnaud gives you. And Klaus likes you. I can tell." Elizabeth's heart stopped. "Klaus Hoffman likes me? He mentioned you last week. Said you were clever. Discreet. He asked if I thought you could be trusted." Werner kissed her shoulder. I told him yes. Elizabeth stared at the ceiling. This was it. The opportunity she had been waiting for. Access to Hoffman. Access to his files, his operations, his secrets. All she had to do was betray Werner. "I will think about it," she said quietly. 2 weeks later, Elizabeth sat across from Klaus Hoffman in his office at Gestapo headquarters on Avenue Foch. The building smelled like fear and cigarette smoke. Hoffman reviewed her application without looking up. "Your references are excellent. Monsieur Arnaud speaks highly of you. Obersturmpf, Brandt, speaks even more highly." He finally met her eyes. "You have made quite an impression, Mademoiselle Dubois." "I try to do good work, Sturmbannf." "Good work?" Hoffman set down the papers. "Do you know what I do here, Marie? Counterintelligence, I believe. I catch spies. I find the people who pretend to be French citizens, but are actually Allied agents. I identify resistance networks and dismantle them. I interrogate prisoners until they tell me everything they know." He leaned forward. "It is unpleasant work. It requires a strong stomach and absolute discretion. Do you have those qualities?" Elizabeth thought about her mother. Fingers broken one by one. 3 days of torture. "Yes," she said. "I do." Hoffman smiled. "Good. You start Monday." Elizabeth walked out of Gestapo headquarters and kept walking until she found an alley where no one could see her. Then she leaned against the wall and tried to breathe. She had done it. She was in. She went to Werner's apartment that night and let him celebrate with champagne and lovemaking. She smiled and laughed and pretended everything was perfect. When he fell asleep, she slipped out of bed and went to the living room where he had left his briefcase. She had watched him open it a dozen times. She knew the combination. Inside were files, reports, names of suspected resistance members, locations of planned raids. Elizabeth photographed everything with the miniature camera hidden in her lipstick case. Her hands did not shake. Her breathing stayed steady. She had done this before with documents from Arnaud's office. This was no different, except it was different, because these were Werner's files, Werner's work, Werner's secrets, and she was stealing them, while his warmth still lingered on her skin. Elizabeth returned the files and went back to bed. Werner stirred and pulled her close, mumbling something in German she did not catch. She lay awake until dawn, staring at his face in the dim light. He looked young when he slept, vulnerable, human. She wondered what he would do if he knew the truth, if he would turn her in, if he would shoot her himself, if he would hate her. She wondered if she would hate herself more for betraying him or for caring that he might hate her. 3 months later, Elizabeth sat at her new desk outside Hoffman's office, typing reports and filing documents, and passing every piece of information she could to her resistance contact. She was deep inside the Gestapo now. She had access to everything, and every night she went home to Werner. She let him hold her. She let him love her. She let him believe she was Marie Dubois, a French secretary, who had somehow fallen for a German officer despite the war. She became so good at lying that sometimes she forgot where Marie ended and Elizabeth began. On a Friday evening in March 1943, Werner came home with flowers and a nervous smile. "Marie," he said, getting down on one knee in the middle of his apartment. "I know the timing is terrible. I know the world is insane. But I love you, and I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life." He pulled out a ring. "Will you marry me?" Elizabeth looked down at him. This good man who trusted her, this enemy who loved her, this soldier who had no idea the woman he wanted to marry was the spy his best friend had been hunting for months. She should have said no. She should have found an excuse, bought time, contacted London for instructions. Instead, she heard herself say, "Yes." Werner stood and kissed her and spun her around the room. He was laughing. She was crying. And somewhere across Paris, in a Gestapo file cabinet Elizabeth had access to, were the names of 17 resistance fighters who would be arrested at dawn unless she warned them in time. She went to the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. Marie Dubois looked back, engaged, in love, trapped. Elizabeth Thornton was screaming somewhere deep inside. She splashed water on her face and went back to Werner and let him make love to his fiancée. Later, after he fell asleep, she slipped out of the apartment and ran through the dark streets to the dead drop. She left the warning for Claude. 17 people would live because she chose them over her cover, over her safety, over everything. She made it back, before Werner woke. In the morning, he kissed her and called her his wife-to-be, and went to work. Elizabeth sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the ring on her finger. She was going to marry a Nazi, and she had absolutely no idea how to stop it. The wedding was set for June 1943. Elizabeth stood in a boutique on Rue de Rivoli while a seamstress pinned a white dress to her body. Werner sat in a chair nearby, smiling like a man who had won the lottery. The seamstress, an older woman with hard eyes, stuck pins into the fabric without looking at Elizabeth's face. She knew what this was. A French girl marrying a German officer. Collaboration in its purest form. Elizabeth wanted to tell her the truth, wanted to scream that this was not what it looked like, but the truth would get them both killed. So she stood still and let the woman pin the dress and hated every second of it. That night, she passed the wedding date to Claude through the dead drop. London needed to know her cover was deepening. They needed to decide if this was an acceptable risk or if they were pulling her out. The response came 3 days later. 4 words written on cigarette paper and hidden inside a hollowed-out book. "Proceed. We need Hoffman." Elizabeth burned the paper and watched the ashes swirl down the drain. London did not care that she was marrying the enemy. They only cared about the intelligence. She was a tool, a weapon, nothing more. She had known that from the beginning. But knowing it and living it were different things. At work, Hoffman was becoming paranoid. 2 of his operations had been compromised in the past month. A raid on a resistance safe house had found it empty, the occupants gone hours before the Gestapo arrived. An arrest of a suspected Allied agent had been blocked when the target fled Paris the night before the operation. Someone was leaking information. Someone inside had access to Hoffman's plans. Elizabeth sat at her desk outside his office and listened to him rage. He suspected everyone, his staff, his informants, even his own officers. But he did not suspect her. Not yet. Hoffman called a meeting of his entire counterintelligence division. 20 officers crammed into a conference room while he paced at the front like a caged animal. "We have a mole," Hoffman said without preamble. "Someone in this building is feeding information to the resistance. Someone in this room might be that person." The room went silent. "I want every operation compartmentalized from now on," Hoffman continued. "No one gets full access to anything except me. Every file goes through Mademoiselle Dubois, and she reports directly to me." He turned and looked at Elizabeth. "You are the only person I trust completely." Elizabeth felt 20 pairs of eyes turn toward her, some resentful, some suspicious. Werner's were concerned. After the meeting, Werner pulled her aside. "Klaus is losing his mind. This mole obsession is making him dangerous." "Should I be worried?" Elizabeth asked. "Not if you have nothing to hide." Werner touched her cheek. "You do not have anything to hide, do you, Marie?" For a fraction of a second, Elizabeth considered telling him everything, confessing, begging for help. But she looked into his eyes and saw the uniform beneath the man. "Of course not," she said. Werner kissed her forehead. "Good, because Klaus does not forgive. If he finds the mole, he will not just arrest them. He will destroy them." That night, Elizabeth met Claude in a cemetery on the outskirts of Paris. It was risky, meeting face to face, but the dead drop was not secure enough anymore. Claude was a thin man with gray hair and the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. He had been running resistance cells since 1940 and somehow stayed alive through 3 years of Gestapo raids. "You need to slow down," Claude said, lighting a cigarette. "Hoffman is hunting. Every piece of intelligence you pass makes him more suspicious." "If I slow down, people die," Elizabeth said. "If you get caught, more people die. Entire networks. Everyone you have ever contacted." Claude exhaled smoke. "London is pushing you too hard. They are going to burn you out." "London wants Hoffman. I am close. His files, his operations, everything goes through me now. And when he figures out the mole is you, what then?" Elizabeth did not have an answer. Claude dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his heel. "There is something else. Word on the street is Hoffman is planning something big."
A sweep of suspected resistance members across Paris. Mass arrests. He is calling it Operation Thunderclap. When? We do not know. That is why you need to find out. Elizabeth nodded. "I will look through his files. Be careful, Marie, or Elizabeth, or whoever the hell you are anymore." Claude looked at her with something like pity. "You are getting too deep. I can see it. You are starting to believe your own cover. I know what I am doing." "Do you?" Claude turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. Hoffman had his informants dig into Werner Brandt's background. I do not know why. But he is looking at your fiancé? Closely." The words hit Elizabeth like a punch. "What are you saying?" "I am saying maybe Hoffman does not trust you as much as he claims. Maybe he is using you to get to Werner. Or maybe he is using Werner to test you." Claude disappeared into the shadows. "Watch your back." Elizabeth walked home through empty streets, her mind racing. Hoffman was investigating Werner. Why? What had Werner done? Or was Claude right? Was this a test? She found the answer 3 days later. Elizabeth was alone in the office late, filing reports, when she noticed a folder on Hoffman's desk she had not seen before. It was marked confidential, which meant it should have been locked in his safe. But it was not. It was sitting right there. She looked around. The office was empty. Hoffman had left an hour ago. The guards were downstairs. Elizabeth opened the folder. Inside were surveillance reports, photographs, transcripts of intercepted conversations, all about Werner Brandt. She read through them with growing horror. Hoffman had been watching Werner for months. Every meeting, every phone call, every moment they spent together. One report made her stomach drop. Subject displays possible sympathies toward enemy elements. Recommend continued observation. Particular attention to relationship with Marie Dubois. Subject may be compromised. Hoffman suspected Werner was the mole. Elizabeth closed the folder with shaking hands. This was insane. Werner was not the mole. She was. Hoffman had the wrong person. But if Hoffman arrested Werner, if he interrogated him, Werner would tell them everything he knew about Marie Dubois, where she lived, where she worked before, who her friends were. And eventually, Hoffman would find the holes in her cover story. Elizabeth had to warn Werner. But how? If she told him about the file, he would know she had been snooping. He would ask questions she could not answer. She was trapped. That night, Werner came home excited. Klaus invited us to dinner tomorrow, both of us. He said he wants to celebrate our engagement properly. Elizabeth felt ice in her veins. Just the three of us. Yes, his apartment. 8 o'clock. Werner pulled her close. He is finally warming up to the idea of us getting married. I told you he would come around. Elizabeth buried her face in Werner's shoulder, so he would not see her expression. Hoffman knew. This was not a celebration. This was an interrogation. She had less than 24 hours to figure out what to do. The next evening, Elizabeth dressed carefully. She wore the blue dress Werner liked. She carried her lipstick case with the hidden camera. She strapped the knife to her thigh. If Hoffman was planning to arrest her, she would not go quietly. They arrived at Hoffman's apartment at 8 sharp. It was elegant, sterile, filled with expensive furniture and no personal touches, like a hotel room for a ghost. Hoffman greeted them with champagne and a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Werner, Marie, come in. I have been looking forward to this." They sat down to dinner. Roast chicken, real vegetables, wine that probably cost more than most Parisians made in a month. Hoffman played the perfect host. Charming, witty, relaxed. But Elizabeth could feel him watching her, studying every word, every gesture. Halfway through the meal, Hoffman refilled their glasses and raised his own. A toast to Werner and Marie. May your marriage be built on truth and trust. Werner clinked glasses. Elizabeth forced herself to drink. "Tell me, Marie," Hoffman said, setting down his glass. "How did you and Werner meet? I realized I never asked." "At a reception. The Ritz. You were there." "Ah, yes, I remember now. You were nervous that night. Any woman would be nervous surrounded by so many important men." Hoffman smiled. "And yet you handled it beautifully. You have a remarkable ability to adapt, Marie, to become exactly what the situation requires." The words hung in the air like a knife. Werner laughed, oblivious. "She does she not? I am marrying a chameleon." "Indeed." Hoffman turned to Werner. "Tell me, old friend, have you noticed anything unusual about Marie? Anything that does not quite fit?" Werner frowned. What do you mean? I mean, everyone has secrets, Werner. Everyone has parts of themselves they hide, even from the people they love. Hoffman's gaze never left Elizabeth. I am simply wondering if you know all of Marie's secrets. Elizabeth felt her pulse hammering. This was it. Hoffman was making his move. Werner set down his fork. Klaus, what is this about? It is about trust. Hoffman stood and walked to a cabinet. He pulled out a folder. The same folder Elizabeth had seen on his desk. He opened it and laid photographs on the table. Not of Werner. Of her. Elizabeth meeting Claude in the cemetery. Elizabeth at the dead drop behind Boulevard Saint-Michel. Elizabeth photographing documents in Werner's apartment. Hoffman had known. The entire time he had known. Werner stared at the photographs. His face went white. Marie? Elizabeth did not move, could not breathe. Your fiancée is a spy, Werner, Hoffman said calmly. An Allied agent. She has been feeding intelligence to the resistance for over a year. She seduced you to gain access to your files.
She used you. Hoffman looked at Elizabeth. Did I miss anything, Mademoiselle Thornton? Werner looked at her. Elizabeth Thornton? The sound of her real name in his voice broke something inside her. Werner, she started. Is it true? His voice cracked. Any of it? Elizabeth could lie. She was good at lying, but she was so tired of it. Yes, she whispered. Werner stood so fast his chair fell over. He stared at her like she was a stranger. Everything? All of it? You and me? Not all of it. Werner, please. How long? His hands were shaking. How long have you been lying? Since the beginning. Hoffman watched them both with clinical interest. This is touching truly, but we have business to conclude. He nodded toward the door. 2 Gestapo officers entered. Elizabeth Thornton, you are under arrest for espionage against the Reich. The officers moved toward her. Elizabeth's hand went to her thigh, to the knife. But Werner stepped between them. Wait. Hoffman raised an eyebrow. Werner? Give me 1 minute, please, just 1 minute alone with her. Hoffman considered, then nodded. 1 minute. But if she tries anything, my men will shoot her. And possibly you. The officers stepped back. Hoffman left the room, closing the door behind him. Werner and Elizabeth stood facing each other across the ruins of dinner. Was any of it real? Werner asked quietly. Elizabeth wanted to lie one more time, but she owed him this. I do not know anymore. Werner closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. I loved you. I know. Did you love me? The question gutted her. I was not supposed to. That is not an answer. Elizabeth looked at the man she had used, lied to, betrayed. The man who had shown her kindness in a city of cruelty. The man who had trusted her with everything. Yes, she said. God help me. Yes. Werner let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. I do not know if that makes this better or worse. The door opened.
Hoffman returned. Time is up. The officers grabbed Elizabeth's arms. She did not resist. As they led her toward the door, Werner spoke one last time. Marie! Elizabeth! Whoever you are, I hope it was worth it. Elizabeth looked back at him. It was not. They dragged her out of the apartment and down to a car waiting in the street. Hoffman got in beside her. You played the game well, he said as the car pulled away. But I always win in the end. Elizabeth stared out the window at Paris passing by. What happens now? Hoffman smiled. Now? Now I make you tell me everything, every contact, every operation, every name. He leaned close. And if you think you are strong enough to resist, remember this. I broke your mother in 3 days. I wonder how long you will last. The car turned onto Avenue Foch, toward Gestapo headquarters, toward the interrogation rooms in the basement, where people went in and did not come out. Elizabeth thought about her mother, about Werner, about every choice that had led her to this moment. She had wanted revenge. She had wanted justice. Instead, she had fallen in love with the enemy and destroyed the only good thing in her manufactured life. The car stopped. The officers pulled her out. As they led her inside, Elizabeth made a decision. She would not break. She would not give Hoffman a single name. No matter what he did, no matter how long it took. She owed Werner that much. She owed her mother more. The interrogation room smelled like blood and fear. Elizabeth sat in a metal chair, bolted to the floor, her wrists chained to the armrests. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swinging slightly, casting shadows that made the room feel smaller than it was. She had been here for 3 days, or maybe 4. Time stopped meaning anything after the first 24 hours. Hoffman sat across from her, impeccably dressed, smoking a cigarette. He had not touched her, had not raised his voice. He simply asked questions and waited.
Tell me about your contact, the one you call Claude. Elizabeth said nothing. Tell me about the dead drop on Boulevard Saint-Michel. Silence. Tell me how you got your orders from London. Elizabeth stared at the wall behind his head. She had learned early in training that eye contact was weakness. Give them nothing. Not a word. Not a glance. Not a flicker of emotion. Hoffman stubbed out his cigarette. You are stronger than I expected. Your mother screamed by the second day. But you? He stood and walked around behind her. You are different, more disciplined, better trained. Elizabeth felt his hand on her shoulder. She forced herself not to flinch. But everyone breaks eventually, Hoffman whispered near her ear. Everyone. The door opened. A guard entered and handed Hoffman a file. Hoffman read it, and for the first time since her arrest, he smiled. It seems we found your baker friend, Claude Moreau, age 53, widower, 2 children evacuated to the countryside in 1940. Hoffman closed the file. We picked him up an hour ago. He is in the next room. He leaned down close to Elizabeth. Would you like to hear him scream? Or will you tell me what I want to know? Elizabeth felt something crack inside her chest. Claude. They had Claude. Nothing to say? Hoffman straightened. Very well. Let us see how long your silence lasts when you hear what we do to him. He left the room. Elizabeth sat alone in the chair, chains cutting into her wrists, and waited for the screaming to start. It never came. Instead, the door opened again, but it was not Hoffman who entered. It was Werner. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his uniform wrinkled like he had slept in it. He pulled up a chair and sat across from her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They are going to execute you, Werner said finally. Tomorrow morning. Firing squad. Unless you cooperate. Elizabeth looked at him.
Why are you here? Because Klaus asked me to convince you to talk. Werner laughed bitterly. He thinks you might listen to me, because of what we had. What we had was a lie. Was it? Werner leaned forward. Because I have spent 3 days trying to convince myself of that. Trying to remember every moment, every conversation, every touch, and find the lie in it. And I cannot. Werner, I loved you, he said. I know I was a fool. I know you were playing a role, but I loved you. And I think somewhere underneath all the lies, you loved me too. Elizabeth felt tears burning behind her eyes. She would not cry. Not here. Not now. It does not matter, she said. Love does not change what I did, who I am. No, but it matters to me. Werner reached across the table. His hand hovered near hers, but did not touch. Klaus is lying. He does not have your contact. The man he arrested is just a baker. No resistance connections. He grabbed him, hoping you would panic and confirm it. Elizabeth stared at him. Why are you telling me this? Because I do not want you to break for nothing. Werner pulled his hand back. But you are going to break, Marie. Elizabeth, whatever your name is. Klaus will not stop. And when you do break, people will die. Your entire network. Everyone you tried to protect. Then I will not break. Everyone breaks. Werner stood and walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the handle. There is another option. What option? Cooperate. Give Klaus enough to satisfy him, but not enough to destroy your network. I can help you. We can craft a story together. Feed him false information. Make him think he won. Werner turned to face her. And then I get you out. Elizabeth felt the room tilt. What? I can get you out of Paris. Out of France. It will take time, but I have connections. Officers who owe me favors. Papers can be forged. Transport arranged. His voice dropped. I can save you, but you have to trust me. Why would you do that? I betrayed you. I used you. Because I am not Klaus. Werner crossed back to her. Because I have spent 3 days thinking about what you did and why you did it. Your mother was executed by the Gestapo in Lyon, probably by Klaus himself. You came here for revenge. You became Marie Dubois to destroy the man who killed her. Elizabeth could not breathe. How did you? I looked into your real background. Elizabeth Thornton, New York, Mother Marie Laurent, executed February 1942 for resistance activity. Werner crouched beside her chair. You did not seduce me for intelligence. You seduced me because I was close to Klaus. Because you needed access. And somewhere along the way, it became real. Tears spilled down Elizabeth's cheeks. She could not stop them. I hate what you did, Werner said quietly. I hate that you lied. I hate that every moment we had together was built on deception. But I understand why. He unlocked her chains. So I am going to give you a choice. Trust me. Let me help you. Or stay silent and die tomorrow believing you protected everyone. Elizabeth rubbed her wrists where the chains had cut into her skin. If I trust you, if I let you help me, Klaus will know. He will arrest you too. Let me worry about Klaus. Werner, he will kill you. Perhaps. But at least I will die knowing I saved the woman I love, even if she never really existed. Werner stood. You have until tonight to decide. I will come back before dawn. If you want my help, tell me. If not, I will walk away and let you face the firing squad with your secrets intact. He left the room. Elizabeth sat alone, free of the chains, but more trapped than ever. The hours crawled by. Guards brought her water and bread she did not eat. The light bulb above her head flickered and buzzed. She thought about her mother, about the choice Marie Laurent had made to stay silent while the Gestapo broke her, about the 12 people who lived because she never gave up their names. Elizabeth had wanted to be like her mother, strong, unbreakable, a hero. But her mother had not been in love with a German officer. Her mother had not been given a choice between revenge and survival. The door opened just before dawn. Werner entered with a guard's uniform draped over his arm. "Time to decide," he said. Elizabeth looked at him. This man who should hate her. This enemy who loved her. This soldier offering her a way out when she deserved none. "If I do this," she said slowly, "if I let you save me, Claude and the others in my network will think I broke. They will think I betrayed them. Yes. My own people will believe I was a traitor. Yes. I will never be able to go back. To London. To America. To anyone who knew me. I will have to disappear. Become someone else. Again." Werner set the uniform on the chair. "Yes." Elizabeth stood on shaking legs. "And you? What happens to you?" "I told Klaus I am transferring to the Eastern Front. Requested it yesterday. I leave in a week." Werner's expression was unreadable. "I could not stay here. Not after everything. But before I go, I can get you out. I owe you that much." "You do not owe me anything. I destroyed your life." "You did." Werner smiled sadly. "But I would rather have loved you and lost you than never loved you at all, even if you were a lie." Elizabeth picked up the uniform. It was her size. Werner had planned this, had hoped she would say yes. "What about Hoffman?" she asked. "He will know you helped me escape." "By the time he figures it out, I will be in Russia." "And honestly?" Werner laughed. "I would rather face the Red Army than Klaus Hoffman's interrogation room." Elizabeth put on the uniform. It fit perfectly. Werner helped her with the buttons, his fingers gentle, familiar. When she was dressed, she looked like a German guard. Just another soldier in occupied Paris. "There is a truck leaving for the train station in 20 minutes, Werner said. "You will be on it. At the station there is a man named Brunner. Hans Brunner. He owes me. He will get you papers and passage to Switzerland. From there, you are on your own." "Werner, do not," he cut her off. "Do not apologize. Do not thank me. Just go, live. That is enough." Elizabeth looked at this man one last time, memorized his face, the scar on his jaw, the sadness in his eyes. "I did love you," she said. "I need you to know that. It was not all a lie." "I know." Werner opened the door. The hallway was empty. "Now go, before I change my mind." Elizabeth walked out of the interrogation room, down the hallway, past guards, who did not look twice at another uniform. She walked out of Gestapo headquarters into the cold dawn air of Paris. She climbed into the truck Werner had described. Other soldiers were already inside, tired men, heading to the train station for deployment. No one questioned her presence. As the truck pulled away, Elizabeth looked back at the building. At the window, she knew was Hoffman's office, and standing in that window was Klaus Hoffman himself, watching the truck disappear down the street. For a moment, their eyes met. Hoffman raised his hand in a small salute. Then he turned away from the window. Elizabeth's blood went cold. He knew. Hoffman knew she was escaping, and he was letting her go. The truck rumbled through empty streets toward the train station. Elizabeth sat among the soldiers and tried to understand. Hoffman had known from the beginning, had watched her, caught her, and now was letting her escape. Why? The answer hit her like a bullet. Werner. Hoffman was not interested in her. He was interested in Werner. This whole thing, the arrest, the interrogation, the escape, it was a test. Hoffman was watching to see what Werner would do, who he would choose, his country or his love. And Werner had chosen her. Elizabeth jumped out of the truck before it reached the station. She ran through streets filling with morning workers, her heart pounding, her breath tearing through her lungs. She had to warn Werner. Had to tell him Hoffman knew. Had to save him the way he had saved her. She made it to Avenue Foch just as the sun crested the buildings. Gunshots echoed from inside Gestapo headquarters. 3 shots, execution style. Elizabeth stopped running. A guard emerged from the building, smoking a cigarette. He saw her standing there in the stolen uniform and laughed. "Looking for Obersturm, Herr Brandt?" "Too late. Sturmbannf. Herr Hoffmann just shot him for treason." The guard flicked ash. "Apparently he helped a spy escape. Can you believe that? A German officer falling for a resistance whore?" Elizabeth could not move, could not breathe, could not process the words. Werner was dead. Hoffman had killed him, and it was her fault. The guard walked past her, still laughing. Elizabeth stood alone on the street, dressed like the enemy, while inside the building the man she loved bled out on the floor. She could go back inside, could surrender, could tell Hoffman to kill her too. Or she could honor Werner's sacrifice, could escape, could live, could make sure his death meant something. Elizabeth turned away from Gestapo headquarters and walked toward the train station. Her legs moved automatically, one foot in front of the other. She found Hans Brunner, got her papers, boarded a train to Switzerland. As Paris disappeared behind her, Elizabeth Thornton realized she had achieved everything she set out to do. She had infiltrated the Gestapo. She had stolen Hoffman's secrets. She had damaged the Nazi war machine in ways that would ripple for months. And it had cost her everything: her identity, her soul, the man she loved. Hoffman had not needed to break her in an interrogation room. He had broken her by letting her escape, by making her watch the price of that escape.
She arrived in Switzerland 3 days later, made contact with Allied intelligence. They debriefed her, praised her work, gave her a new identity, and a ticket to London. She never told them about Werner, never mentioned that a German officer had died to save her. Some secrets were too painful to share. Elizabeth lived through the rest of the war, saw Paris liberated in 1944, heard about Hoffman's arrest at the end of the war, heard he had been tried and executed for war crimes. She felt nothing. After the war, she moved to a small town in America, where no one knew her name. She never married, never spoke about what she had done in Paris. But every year on the anniversary of Werner's death, she went to church and lit a candle for the German officer who loved a lie and died for the truth. And she wondered, for the rest of her life, if love and duty could ever coexist, or if choosing one meant destroying the other. She never found an answer. Some questions do not have them,